right, good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education Finance Committee meeting for Monday, June 15th, 2026. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item of business, we do have a request for one of the members to join remotely. They meet the requirement for the Open Meetings Act to participate remotely. Do I have a motion to allow Dan Choi to join us?
So moved.
And I'll second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, we'll allow Dan to join us.
Extension is not valid.
Hello, Dan, you're live in the meeting. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you just fine, thanks. Yep. Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, Dan. All right, moving on to item number 2, public comment. Do we have any public comment tonight? Not seeing anyone. We'll move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. We have the minutes from May 26th, 2026. Bonnie, did you receive any corrections? Do we have any at this time? All right, I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Item number 4, discussion and consideration. Tonight we have the 2026-2027 draft budget. Mr. Latham.
All right, good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee. So this is our 25-26 draft budget. Runs through July 1st, 26 through June 30th of 27. Be presenting this tonight to the Finance Committee, and then Adrian will be presented to the Board of Education during the regular meeting. Just a couple points of order for us about this process. So actually in 2 days we get our actual distribution of our taxes. So we'd actually really would know what the taxes would look like. It's just the time of this meeting to when they come out. And so those numbers will actually be updated, probably Thursday morning. We'll be looking at those and we'll actually know what the taxes look like for the end of this fiscal year and the beginning of next fiscal year. And then on top of that, of course, at the end of the month, we'll really have a good idea of what the ending fund balances look like. So these numbers are really rough. They typically are. I mean, we're still paying fuel and our utilities and some other costs that we have come in. We're of course buying things still under our grant. And so there's still a lot of activity taking place this particular month. So I'll go ahead and get started then with our presentation. So these are just some assumptions. We've had some really good strong EAV, so we're estimating a 5% increase. Local taxes, looking at the PTEL requirements, we're probably looking at about 3.2% increase. That's what the average has been so far this year. Kind of gives us a yardstick of that. Evidence-based funding is maintained. We're a Tier 4 school, so we expect no new dollars. Construction has been it was low this year, and we expect maybe the next year to maybe be the same with just some slower growth. Yeah, we've kind of forecasted out some of our investments. We're looking at about an estimated 4.2% returns, which is down from the prior year, which we were maybe the high 4s, low 5s. It's just going to affect a lot of the local income that you see through all of the funds. And then we're really needing to get to our fund balance, and so we can identify what the transfers look like to support our capital plan and our fleet management. On the expenditure side, we're going to be following our collective bargaining agreements, our working agreements, and assumption again is full staffing. There may be some attrition that takes place throughout the year. For benefits, we've seen those health increases. The PPOs estimated at about 5.9%, the HMO 9.9%, and we're at about 2.8 to 3% of our dental. So we're going to see that huge cost come in on our benefits. And then also on top of that, for Fund 10, you'll see the pension contributions for those that are certified. Those other ones, you'll see those carry over into Fund 50 for some of those other benefits, such as FICA, IMRF, for example. And then our purchase services, those are going to be supporting those agreements that we have from outside providers that give us support throughout the year. Everything from professional development to support services to our legal needs. And then supplies and materials, we're still looking at that 3.2%, which is our CPI. This year we've seen a little cost at the end for our fuel especially, and And that was something that we budgeted, and then it's really going to affect us here at the end of this fiscal year. Our capital, our equipment costs and capital plans, that's, now that's a $10,000 threshold. It used to be $3,000, and now with the cost of everything, that's driven up our capital threshold. Our expenses under other, our dues, our fees, some of the contingency money that we've set into our budget, and some of our external tuition, and then lastly, our non-capital is just the replacement of our equipment and new equipment. So this is our education fund. I don't want to get too hung up on the actuals because that was there for a reference for you. But as we look at some of the adopted budget and then our projections are really just our best guess at that time. Like I said, taxes actually will come in 2 days. And so we're looking at a little over $73 million for our estimated local taxation. That is an increase. So as you look down the category, you see that growth is there. Our local is down a little bit. That's the effect of that interest income that I mentioned. So our total local overall still is growing. Our state revenue, we're projecting that to be a little lower. That's just indicative of some of the funding we have, and that's verified by our Learning and Teaching Department. And then our federal revenue continues to draw down as we get less grants and we have less carryover dollars. So overall, we're looking at about $84,989,208 of our revenue. Looking below that, we do the same thing with our salaries. We see those costs going up because that's the cost of what we pay our employees for compensation. The benefits is a little off here. I was a little off and shy with this number right here. We're in a benefit elections period. I could put a number in there. It'll be close to probably our budgeted number, but just in a few days we'll kind of have a better picture of what that looks like. And I went back and looked last year. I gave you a number. It ended up being about $200,000 more after the elections came in. So that number will go up. That number will really be more solidified when we get to the next phase, which is our tentative budget, so we can really pull those last minute numbers in. Plus, this is our accrual month, so we have those teacher pays, and we'll be pulling all those dollars in as well. Services have gone up. Some of those areas that we're looking at is just some of the pass-along costs that we have. Supplies, again, go down a little bit. That's because we've done quite a bit the last few years, and I think we made a lot of progress in some of those materials that we need. We also have seen some of the utilities be stable. Our capital costs for our Fund 10 are just some of our routine maintenance. It also includes our tech plan. Some of our other uses are those external costs to Mid-Valley and Fox Valley Career Center, as well as some, I did put in here the tentative increase, so you can see here that this number is quite large.
Yeah.
I did put an estimated number in. I wanted to really see what the fund balance would look like. So I needed something a little more truthful in there for me to see if we were going to meet the fund balance policy. And I just put a number in there just to see how that would impact that. So when you get to the very last page, it looks like we're good with fund balance policy, but I need to put something there to kind of give me an idea of where we could be. If it looked like it was trending very much in the wrong direction, then I need to probably have a different conversation tonight or some different decision making. So I did put that number in. So this number here is without those transfers, and this one is just to see the impact on our fund balance because it is significant, and I didn't want it to look too low, and I think it's in a comfortable stage. Not a great number, not like it has been for the last couple of years, but a number I think that we can live and work with.
So I'm a little confused. Do you expect it to be 4.5 million in that range, or do you expect it to be 7.75 million as you have it here?
Yeah, so I would take 3 million off of this number. I expect it to be that 4.755.
Okay.
So, but I did want to see like what the impact is. I didn't want to leave it out and then come back and you're like, wow, that is a much lower number than you told us a couple weeks ago. So overall, this is probably the number that we're looking at for our expenses. So revenue to expenses kind of tells the story that we've been talking about, where we're going to probably be a little bit short in this fund and have to use our fund balances to make everything work, from the fund itself to making some transfers to fund 60. And that's just kind of the reality of the budget this year. Any questions? Okay, yeah. All right, operations and maintenance. So same thing. We're still seeing the same amount of growth that we have from our local taxation. In our taxation process, our local is going to be down a little bit. This number here is quite higher this year, right in here. We had really good interest income. We had some land cash come to us at the last minute that we didn't anticipate. The city had held on to that and brought that over to us this year. And then the last thing was we had a big E-rate, which is a reimbursement from the government through a program. And so that really made this number go from this to this that we didn't anticipate, and we're bringing it back down to what we think is a more reasonable level. E-rate's definitely going to drop. As I mentioned, the housing probably is going to slow down a little bit, at least from what we estimated, and then of course our interest income is. So that's probably a much better number, I think, going into next year. State revenue just kind of follows just some of our evidence-based funding. So overall, we estimate $16,970,161. Our expenses still follow our salary trend of increasing with the cost of providing wages and compensation to our employees. Benefits increase as well from those pass on for basically health services. For the services that we have that we need in that particular fund, a couple things come out of it. Just a reminder, that's our architectural engineering, that's some of our construction costs. Those are reflective of the cost to get our plans ready. And then our supplies reflect kind of that inflationary cost that we see going up in this particular fund. So remember, Ed didn't really need a whole lot of supplies, but this fund certainly does. And then our capital is a little lower. That's because a lot of our needs this year are focused on Fund 60 and not within this particular fund itself. And we'll review that and update it as we get close to that final draft of the budget for next time, where we really have all those pieces in place. We know really what we're looking at for next year. The other uses include a contingency in there, so if we do have some needs, and remember in the past we've used that to help some of our LED lights to get those in advance and get that rolling. That's in there as well. And then our non-capital is just some of the replacement of our equipment that we definitely need to have. So overall, looking at about $14,880,758. And so we have more revenue expenses here, which allows us to move some of those funds over to cover Fund 60. So when we get the end of this particular month and we know what that fund balance is, probably looking at a little over $4 million to come out of this. So 3 for the ed fund, 4 something from this to make that capital plan happen. Debt service is debt service. You see the ad valorem. So remember, we do our taxes. The county clerk adds a 1% to capture a little bit more. We did draw down the local just because we see some of the interest income coming down. We'll take some other action next year in this particular category with some of our debt services. So trending just 1.83% higher, typical of what we've seen here in the schedule. On the other uses, that just follows our debt service plan, so we'll follow along with that as we need to, and so I think this fund just typically always falls in line with what we have planned through that debt structure. Transportation, so same thing. We're going to see an increase in our local taxation. Some of our local costs have gone down with transportation. That's basically interest income. Also maybe a little fluctuation in some of our ridership. Just kind of depends on parents' needs, so we pulled that down a little bit, mostly from interest income. State revenue, a little less than what we budgeted for last year. Our categoricals keep being reduced by the state. They fund less of those every year, and so the difficult piece of the puzzle is a couple things happen in August. We don't get our personal property replacement tax, the PPRT for Fund 10 until August, just like we don't file the claim until August for the transportation. So we can estimate all we want, but we really won't know what some of the state reimbursement numbers look like. So we think it's going to come in at about $4,469,245. And then looking at our salaries, we see that reflective of some of the increases that we've had in compensation. The benefits I brought back down. You can see it had a high right here of about $95,000. We had one person go into a PPO plan that we didn't anticipate for last year's budget. I'm going to go back and check and see if that person has elected that, if that's the same person, or if that changed. It could go back up to the 95. I won't know until the election period's over. It's just a good example about how one person changing their elections can increase a cost in the benefit area. Services will continue for our professional services. That's everywhere from our software to some of the towing that we have to some of our special needs transportation through the Mid-Valley program that we get billed for, as well as our insurance. And then our supplies are really the cost of our fuel, our parts, our tires, a lot of the utilities that we pay out the transportation building. The capital reflects right here. This is our bus purchase. We could adjust that up. That's probably not going to cover all the original buses we thought we'd need in the fleet plan just because of cost. We may be able to squeeze one more bus into there. And so we'll come back and maybe adjust that number. Also get a better feel for what that cost looks like going into next year to purchase a bus. And then some of the final numbers we have there are other uses that has a contingency in there as well in case we have a engine or a transmission go that's not under warranty. And then lastly, $10,000 for non-capital. Those are just some other basically equipment or tools that we might need. So really that's the transportation fund. Looking at retirement fund, same thing. So every time that we increase salaries, it ends up increasing this as well. So we see the ad valorem taxes come down a little bit. And I pulled that down this year because I levied less. That fund balance has kind of increased over time, which is not a good thing for your pension type of funds. It's not viewed highly that you keep increasing your pensions, and some of that is also our interest income. So we levied a little less in this area so we could levy a little more someplace else in one of our other funds. That's why that's down. You'll see the interest income come down from this high number here where we had a great year to probably a little more reasonable. And overall, $3,307,217 is our estimated revenue. All the benefits come out of here. You'll see where there's an increase. This typically has gone up into the next budget presentation just because we have our election period over and people tend to move. You may hire somebody that's on a single plan that over time becomes on the family plan, and that's just kind of the reality of how this fund's affected with some of those choices that people make for insurance purposes. Same thing with pensions. We're making a greater pension payment every time that their compensation goes up. So those are all kind of in this particular fund. Overall, 3.3 million revenue, 3.2. Again, we're trying to get this one as close as we can so we can draw it to even or draw a little more money out of this particular fund as we draw it down. Capital projects. So this is a good example of how some of this works. So this is just all interest income, so we brought that down to what we think is more reasonable. This is just a little bit about the history of this particular fund and what we've been able to move over to provide for capital projects. And this is an example of how we've used the different funds to fund this process to get to these numbers. So over the last couple of years, 4 years, actually $32 million of projects. That all came out of our fund balance, right? So we draw it up and we draw it back down to make those happen. So this number is not the ideal number that we've been talking about in facilities. I got to squeeze about another $400,000 out of here to make that O&M director magic number of 8.1. But I want to put a number that I thought was a starting point, right? So when we come back and we adjust some of these, we'll be moving toward that better number, and make sure we get all those projects in. And everything should be bid by then, and we have a really good number that we'll put in there. So overall, if you look at the history of that fund, we've really ramped it up the last couple of years, as you know, and that's an investment that we've done, but at some point it's not sustainable.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I just wanted to jump in and note exactly that. Like, we've been investing a lot in our facilities, and I think that's great. But to your point, we can't do that forever from the ed fund too, so, or from the fund balance rather. So knowing that we've been doing that investing and knowing that there's still a lot to do, that's one of those things I want us to continue to be mindful of. And for the community who's hopefully watching and paying a little attention here, that we want to be mindful of that. We can't do this forever, but we still got to make sure we're maintaining and continuing to improve our buildings, because we've done a lot, but there's more to do. So thanks, Todd.
Yep. Okay, and then the working cash, that's really just interest income. That is our investment fund that we have. You know, it's really grown over time for us, and we use it a couple ways. You see this year we loaned some of the funds from that to cover our flex because it was lower. We also have a couple things that we could do. It's also a fund that you can loan money to or permanently transfer to another fund. So those are some options as it keeps growing that we can use some of those funds as well. But it's really been good for us because as it's growing, we've really had good opportunities for our return on our investment, and you see that in this fund as its growth has occurred. Towards the same way, it's really just interest income that we have, and that fund continues to grow. We expect just a little less. It looks like a big number, that's because there's not a lot of money in this particular fund, but it is less interest income we project. And then lastly, our life, health, and safety. So we did go out and we levy this. We don't levy in this fund every year. It's when we have those needs for that 10-year life, health, safety. And this year, of course, we had those. And so we did levy in that. So we expect $216,000 to come in the levy. We'll be able to verify that this week. And then going out, we have 2 projects Each one is estimated at $250,000. Those are things such as plumbing, handrails, door hardware, and some of our exhaust fans that we'll be replacing under that A area of the life, health, safety. And then that'll pretty much wrap up those projects. This is an example that I gave you of just the budget from revenue from the budget to projected to the draft, just so you can kind of look across those areas and see how that plays out. And so this was this year's budget. This is our estimation. This is what next year looks like. Then it's the same thing with our salaries. What we're looking at there is, as well as the salaries down this way from what we budgeted to what we think is going to happen to what we see for next year. And so overall, this is this number for revenue. This is the number for expenses, and somewhere in between there, we got to tighten a few things up from what we anticipate. But that gives you an idea of how things have occurred over time from budget last year to what we anticipate to budget for next year. So all sources are put on this particular page for the revenue and expenses. Any questions on the page? Okay, then lastly, kind of same thing, but I put all the funds on here for you, so you can see the top one is the 25-26 budget, our current budget year, revenues to expenses, and where we might see some shortfalls on this particular line right here. And so then this is where we anticipate it coming in as the number projected. We're going to go back, of course. I'm sorry, this is the budget for next year. This is where we believe this is going to end up. So we've got a little bit of work to do in our office. And then on the very bottom, this is the estimated. I went back and estimated out what the beginning balance would be. And this is where that $3 million kind of played into that for me to see what that number looked like. And then what this number looks like for our total fund balance, just to make sure that I kind of ensure we have enough in those and that we're being mindful of the funds that we have. So revenue expenses for current year, revenue expenses for next year in our budget, and then the last group of numbers is really just the beginning balance, using those numbers and what the end of balance might be, just to see where we're at. So that number, if you're really interested and want to check how good I am, you can go back and look at that 10-year projection I gave you and see how that number plays out to where we think we'll be. I think that's probably the trend that we have, unfortunately, of drawing those funds down, but I think that's kind of where we're at in the draft budget, just for the picture of our financials. And then July we come back with a tentative that we'll bring that the board can approve as a tentative. We put that on display in July for 30 days. We take public comment, and then we come back in August and attempt to have the final budget approved with an adopted budget. All right, questions?
Any questions? Yeah, I don't have any either.
Okay.
Thank you for the different ways of showing us the numbers so
Yes.
we can analyze it.
Dr. Bear?
I just have one question. I mean, just explain it, but if you could explain it one more time for me on the second to last, or yes, or last slide, that was summary, bottom, at the end, explain that chart again,
Yeah, so we use a smoothing attempt for some of our balances. We'll forecast those out using a couple different avenues of approach. In May, we'll divide that by 11 and forecast out what 12 months look like. And then we look at the current fund balance and we try to figure out and project where that will end up. So I think you're talking about this, probably this last box here on the last slide that has the draft summary. And so we don't know what the fund balances are, but we'll estimate what we believe the end of June at 6:30 will look like, and then we apply the revenue and expenses that we forecast out, try to get at what we think the ending fund balance will be this time on 6:30 of 2027. So it's not a perfect science, it's just our estimation where we think we're going to be begin with the end of year fund balances for this, and then we'll be at the end of next year fund balances. They're all estimated.
So Todd, to clarify for Dan's question here, what I think you're saying is, so estimated beginning balance in the ed fund 28,981,102.
Yes.
That's what you believe. That's right now best estimate for what the fund balance will be in the education fund when we hit June 30 here
At the
in
end
a
of the
couple
month.
weeks.
Yes.
And so all the way across there, those are the numbers that you fully believe our fund balances will be as we hit the end of this year. And then the number in the bottom row all the way across is what you would estimate the ending fund balance would be in each of those different funds at the end of this upcoming budget year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Does that answer your?
Does that make
Mr.
sense,
Schwab?
Dan?
Yep, so right now our fund balance, estimated fund balance is 70,069,890, and then, at the end of the year, the 61,6 is what we're thinking.
Correct.
Correct. As we're continuing to kind of use up that fund balance largely for a lot of this capital work that we were talking about earlier. So I am glad you brought that up because that's another example of kind of what we were highlighting earlier, that a lot of good work is happening, but also not a sustainable approach forever.
And then if you could explain the big jump, or the big jump in the working cash, do we always have that in the working cash?
It's going to keep growing because that's where the majority of our interest income goes into. So whatever fund has the highest fund balance gets the most interest through our allocation process. We use the end of the prior month and identify the fund balances, and then we distribute our interest income based upon those percentages. So because this is such a large fund, it's going to have the most income come into it, and we're going to see the biggest jump in that fund.
Todd, he brought up, with Dan bringing up working cash, I mean, that is big. Is that a place where we might be able to find some solutions to some of these other things as we go forward? I mean, does working cash, for a district our size, does working cash need to be there, or could a one-time transfer out of that maybe help smooth some of these other things?
We could move some of those funds out, and that would be by public notice and resolution.
Yeah.
And then, so for example, we feel like this fund's too low, we could move some of this over. Doesn't change our
Gotcha.
bottom line, but it makes
Right.
the fund better.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and if that's where the need is, then that's why you can move those funds to
Right.
put it where the need is.
Thank you.
They're all positive, so I'm not sure what the value would be to bring the working cash over, except for the life safety, but, I mean.
If it ever got too low, and we had concerns because our fund balance is based upon our operating funds, and so we could move that just to shore up some of our operating funds if we felt like it was better placed there, because we've accrued enough interest. We need to reallocate it to a different fund to place it where we think it's best. But yes, they all are positive numbers. So I would typically leave it there and let it keep growing as long as we can until we need it someplace else.
Todd, one other question in regards to the number that this year, is there a limit in terms of the number that this year, is it 10%?
It's limited to the plan that's placed on file through the O&M office through our director, working with our architects and our engineers, and that number is typically only reflective of what we need to do our life, health, safety. It's the two $250,000 projects that are in place at each of the middle schools to address those areas. I mentioned some of the plumbing, door issues, handrails, just some of the overall safety that we need. So there's two of those that are $250 each, which is why it comes out to this perfect number, which is in the plan. This is not an ideal number, so we'll have to see how to get that there. It could just be a difference of where this fund ends up from where we think it is to some other interest to make it a little more acceptable. Okay.
All right. Anything else, Paul? All right, thanks. Good discussion, everyone.
Yep. Lastly, those are just some areas of concern, typical ones that I have, but I put those out there, just some areas that we will continue watching. And then lastly, are any other questions that we have?
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5, future agenda items. As we just heard, we are going to have the 2026-2027 tentative budget, perhaps in July, and then the 2026-2027 final budget, perhaps in August. So that's the target for future agenda items. Item number 6 is items for recommendation to the full board. We have the 2026-2027 draft budget to move on to the full board for consideration. Do I have a motion to move that on?
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we'll move that on to the full board. Item number 7 is information, legislative update. I don't have anything specific tonight. Dr. Barrett, anything?
Nope, nothing tonight.
Okay. Item 8, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned until next time. Thank you.
Thank you.